Welcome to our latest Pepper podcast. On December 11th, 2019, Pepper Hamilton will host our 10th Annual Antitrust Developments update at the Bellevue Hotel in Philadelphia. This interactive seminar will cover some of the leading topics in antitrust today and will provide attendees with practical guidance on how to minimize and manage their exposure in litigation. Jeremy Heep, co-chair of the Litigation and Dispute Resolution Department and co-chair of the Antitrust and Competition section, and Alex Nisenbaum, a member of the firm's Health Sciences Department, join me today for this podcast to preview their panel at the conference. Jeremy and Alex, welcome.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian. Good to be here.
Great. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you spending some time with us today before the conference starts up in a couple weeks. So, Jeremy and Alex, let's start with some background on the conference itself. Pepper has been hosting this event for about 10 years. Why do you think it's had such longevity?
Brian, I'll take that one. This is Jeremy. It's a very exciting conference. We're really thrilled to be on our 10th year. I would say that its success really is due to, one, it focuses on truly cutting-edge issues in the world of antitrust and competition. Two, we make it a real point to offer participants practical advice and pointers as they face these issues. Three, it's always got an interesting international/European flavor. Four, we always have a great keynote speaker. And five, perhaps most importantly, is it always attracts a very excellent quality audience, many of whom have also been coming for the full 10 years.
That's great. Alex, let's turn to you. You'll be covering the ethics panel titled International Litigation and Transactions in the Face of GDPR. Can you tell our audience why this issue is so important?
Sure. Well, Jeremy mentioned practical advice and how we'll try to bring that to the conference. And we see these issues relating to personal data all the time in international litigation and deals. Personal data is circulated constantly in litigation and on the transactional side as an asset, for example. And sometimes there's confusion as to the obligations a lawyer or a client has with respect to that personal data. And of course, as lawyers, we have a duty to preserve the confidences of our clients, and certainly the personal data of an EU resident that we process on their behalf can fall under this professional obligation. And the GDPR and other recently passed legislation provide individuals with certain rights relating to their personal data. And since these individuals aren't necessarily a lawyer's clients or even folks that have interests that are aligned with our clients, lawyers need to understand how to navigate these tensions. And the GDPR also has implications for how lawyers safeguard data, and what technical and organizational measures in GDPR parlance lawyers use to protect their data. And those things are instructive as to the measures that attorneys should consider in safeguarding client information generally.
Thanks, Alex. Jeremy, let's talk about GDPR a little bit more. Can you explain, and Alex mentioned this, but the ethical challenges around it from a litigation standpoint?
Sure. Let me just begin by saying that the newest regulations only became effective in May of 2018, so there's been a very sort of short period of time for experience with the regulations, how they're implemented, and the issues we're facing. So in the litigation world, the rules are becoming more and more clear in how they're being interpreted, but they're still really new. So there are a lot of challenges that we face all the time. A couple of quick examples that are happening in litigation and may also be happening in the transactional side. First, when simply collecting documents from your own client in Europe, one of the practices now is that you have to enter into a contract with your client about how the documents will be handled. So you are now on opposite sides of a negotiating table with your own client, but also have to be aligned in terms of achieving their litigation objective. And without going into too many details, that creates some interesting and challenging ethical problems. A second issue that I've been coming up against is, what do you do as a law firm, with regard to GDPR, if your client says, "Thank you very much for your advice, we choose not to follow it. We will comply or not comply in the way that we think is appropriate." That's a challenge because GDPR creates liability for both the client and the law firm. So again, it gives rise to ethical issues that one has to grapple with.
And Alex, let's turn back to you. What are some of the issues that you're seeing in the transaction side related to GDPR?
Sure, Brian. Well, data can be an important asset in any deal in its own right, and every business uses personal data in a variety of ways. Can have employee data that can be quite sensitive, customer data, and with the definition of personal information being very broad under the GDPR, even business contact information, customer lists, and things like that would be covered under the GDPR. And so issues arise all the time when it comes to the point in the transaction where, for example, you need to transfer that personal data. We need to start doing diligence on employees, or start getting that information over so that when the employees are now employees of the buyer, that you can continue to fulfill your obligations as an employer and things like that. And also, just client data in general. I mean, oftentimes lawyers will be working with U.S. entities that have foreign affiliates, and then a deal will necessitate working with the foreign affiliate, and all of a sudden you have personal data of EU clients. And then on the back end, when you get that information in your own systems, as you go through it in diligence and things like that, you're gonna have an obligation in your own right to make sure that all of your vendors are properly securing that data. So there's a lot of vendor management obligations on the back end that lawyers need to make sure that they're complying with, and to make sure that they're complying with the GDPR in general and comporting with their ethical obligations.
Well, it sounds like it's going to be a great panel. Let's tell our audience what some of the other topics they can expect to hear if they do attend the Antitrust Conference. Jeremy, can you go over that a little bit?
Sure. There are 3 other panels and a very exciting keynote speaker. The first panel is called Re-examining the Great Victories, and it asks a really interesting question, which is these giant Supreme Court cases that the antitrust bar, defense bar primarily, has celebrated as victories, whether they have in fact resulted in less litigation and more defense victories. So, for example, all the way back to Twombly and the pleading standards, are more antitrust cases being thrown out on motions to dismiss. For example, the famous Legion case with vertical price fixing, has that actually helped companies be able to develop uniform pricing policies. The second panel is hot topics, including DOJ's recent guidance on compliance, and the no-poach policy that was promulgated by the Justice Department, actually now in 2016, but that was followed by statements by Assistant Attorney General Del Rahim that there were going to be criminal prosecutions following that policy, which we have not seen yet, although we have seen a fair amount of civil litigation. So that panel will be covering those hot topics. And then the third panel is international competition in the digital economy. And this is really the hottest antitrust issue throughout the world right now. Whether these giant data companies like Google are engaging in practices with regard to massive amounts of data that violate our antitrust/competition laws. And there's all kinds of activity all over the world, and we'll be exploring both U.S. and European developments in that regard. And then finally, we've got Corin Wong Irvin who is the Director of Antitrust Policy and Litigation at Qualcomm, who will be a fascinating speaker addressing these issues.
Thanks, Jeremy, and thanks, Alex. It sounds like it's going to be a great conference. And for our listeners, if you are interested in attending this annual Antitrust Development Update that Pepper hosts in Philadelphia, we said this year it's going to be on December 11th, please visit the Pepper Insight Center on our website at pepperlaw.com for more information and to register. Jeremy and Alex, thanks again.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.